Most brands think they sell luxury. Very few actually create desire. This is the difference. The Future of Luxury podcast with Dr. Daniel Langer. Welcome to the Future of Luxury. I'm Daniel Langer. Today I'm recording this podcast from Palma de Mallorca, and I just had the opportunity to present our luxury report 2026 to 2030 during a luxury session today to a global luxury brand. The report, we called it The Cost of Waiting, and the reception has been unprecedented. So this is why I wanted to dedicate this episode and also a couple of future episodes to the podcast, give you a deep analysis. Since the publication, I've given various media interviews on the finding, and I have presented the report in strategy sessions like today with brands all over the world. The feedback has been remarkably consistent. Leaders of luxury brands tell me that this report is relevant to them well beyond information. It is really shaping, in the meantime, business decisions, investment priorities, market strategies, and how brands prepare for the next 5 years. So we will take some time today to look into the details and to really dissect what we need to know about the findings. And, what we see here is that the industry is sensing that this moment is different, and therefore it deserves more than just a headline summary. So I will take you not only through the details of the report, but I want to give you also a bit of context beyond that. Why we see what we see. I will show you what it means for your decisions. And today we start with the foundation. What carried the industry for the last 20 years? And also why I believe that a lot of those conditions that we have experienced will not repeat. Our cost forecast also has clear assumptions through 2030 that I'm going to explain. And I will also show you what separates the brands that will grow from those that will quietly, in some cases, in other cases, quite abruptly lose relevance. To understand where the industry is heading, you have to understand what carried it until here. So let me take you a little bit back in time, and we will analyze the growth trajectory over the last 20 years or so. For 2 decades, roughly 2 decades, the personal luxury goods market grew almost constantly. Few exceptions, most notably the financial crisis. You probably all remember 2008, 2009. And even then, the market proved remarkably resilient with a quite fast recovery, and also getting not only back on track, but continuing the growth path that it has. The growth rate over the period in these kind of 20-25 years was roughly 6% in a compound annual growth rate. 6% is roughly twice the growth of the global GDP. And because the growth went on for so long and survived a global financial crisis and many other setbacks, many industry analysts that I speak with come kind of to the conclusion that these kind of 6% can be seen as a growth benchmark, as a quasi-intrinsic growth rate. And this is, as if luxury would simply growing 6% year on year just because luxury is luxury. And our analysis says something very different. The growth was never intrinsic. It was driven by specific factors. And when I decompose those 20 years, I see 2 distinct phases. Let's start with phase 1, the 2000s into roughly the 2010. This was an expansion story, and one that ran on several drivers at the same time. The most visible was distribution. Luxury brands expanded their footprint massively. New boutiques, new markets, new airport locations, new department store corners. Think about how the map changed in those years. Cities that had once one luxury address suddenly had entire luxury districts. But underneath the distribution sat something even more powerful: capital. This was the great era of consolidation. Independent family maisons were acquired and integrated into the large luxury groups, wave after wave of M&A activity. For example, I recently had lunch with Anna Fendi, and she told me about the first years of Fendi, and that it took them almost about 60 years or 50 or 60 years to move from one store that they operated into the, more than 300 stores that they had today. So it was a very slow growth in the beginning, and then around that time that we are describing, a massive not only expansion, but also massive activation around the brands. And Fendi is not the only example. There are many more. And with that integration came something the industry had never had at this scale: professional management, shared infrastructure, and above all, capital. Brands that had operated as artisanal houses for centuries suddenly had the balance sheets of a global corporation behind them. And that capital really went to work. Investment in brand building exploded. Advertising reached levels the industry had never seen before. The mega campaigns, celebrity ambassadors, monumental flagships did functions as brand statements more than retail spaces. These are all examples of how the capital was spent. And at the same time, portfolios expanded across categories. For example, fashion houses often moved into accessories. Accessory houses moved into beauty. Watchmakers moved into jewelry. Every brand wanted more entry points, more connections to the customers, more occasions to capture the client. So put it together. More capital, more brands under professional management, more advertising, more categories, more doors. More offer met more demand, and the industry grew. This was the first phase. And then came phase number 2, 2010s to 2020. And this was really a wealth creation story. At its center, China. What happened in China in those years was the biggest wealth creation in the history of humanity. Hundreds of millions of people rising into the middle class. A generation discovering luxury for the first time and treating the logo as a marker of arrival. Brands responded by going deep. Distribution expanded from Beijing and Shanghai into second-tier cities, then into third-tier cities. And every new mall needed luxury anchors, and the brands delivered. I'm Dr. Daniel Langer. I advise some of the most iconic luxury brands in the world, and I'm also the executive professor of luxury strategy at Pepperdine University, and I teach luxury at NYU. The luxury industry is changing faster than ever before. Dramatically shifting consumer expectations, the rise of Gen Z and AI are redefining what luxury means today. And this means companies must operate in a radically different way. This moment demands action. And this is why we created Equite Intelligence. It redefines luxury training for top management, marketing, sales teams, and client-centric roles. It's an innovative digital learning solution that equips your teams with the strategic capabilities needed for the next era of luxury. Our platform delivers real-world insights and tools your teams can apply immediately. The world's leading brands trust us to prepare their teams for this transformation, and this is your moment to future-proof your organization. But, China was never the whole story. Look at the Middle East. It transformed the quality of its retail in the same period. Southeast Asia did the same. And the United States created enormous wealth, especially at the very top, as markets rebounded powerfully after the financial crisis. So, to understand those 6% compound annual growth rates that we saw, we have to picture those forces working together. On one side, brands expanding offers, distribution, and brand investments, funded by unprecedented capital influx. On the other side, historic wealth creation across multiple regions at once, both running simultaneously for years. This is how an industry doubles the pace of global GDP for 2 decades. And this is why I also believe that the 6% CAGR that we saw is not really like a law of nature, something that brands can bank in all the time. It was the product of specific conditions. Now the critical question: do those conditions repeat? Let's look at them one by one. Distribution is now near ubiquitous for many brands. In fact, actually, a lot of brands are starting to consolidate and actually reduce doors again. The white spaces around the world are almost gone. And in many cities, there are more luxury boutiques standing than the demand beneath them justifies. I already spoke about a lot of doors already starting to close. The consolidation play here is largely complete. And then let's have a look at China. And let me be precise here, because this is often misunderstood. And I'm getting so many questions, by companies, but also by the media on China. And I want to be very clear. China will remain a growth country for luxury. But China is different today than it was. It has matured from an emerging market discovering luxury into one of the most sophisticated, most competitive markets in the world. Our analysis suggests that the growth rate there moves into the single digits as a long-term average, instead of the double digits the industry built its plans on. Maturation doesn't mean decline, but it changes everything about the pace. The market is moving into a new phase. A phase, as I said, of maturization. And on top, the maturization comes as a shift that is easy to underestimate and that our report examines in depth. And this is the next generation of luxury clients. We are at the beginning of the biggest wealth transfer in human history, moving towards Gen Z and the generations behind them. And our research shows that Gen Z buys luxury differently. They apply a far harder scrutiny to luxury brands than any generation before them. Their expectations are the highest ever, and their tolerance for inauthenticity is practically non-existent. They inform themselves through channels the brands do not control and frankly often do not really understand, and they respond to peer and creator signals more than to traditional brand authority. And here I recommend the Future of Luxury podcast episode that I recorded a while ago in Shanghai with Damian Maib and Thomas Dirksen, where we look, for example, in depth into the KOL culture in China, and where we dissect really, how the entire digital infrastructure is completely reshaping luxury in terms of not only demand, but in terms of influence. So now combine that what we just discussed with what happened to pricing. Prices rose massively in recent years, and in many cases, those price increases have not been backed by value creation. And customers, of course, understood this. Largely unchanged products, no commensurate improvement in quality, in creativity, or in client experience. Put those developments together, prices that outran value, meeting a generation of clients who scrutinize harder than ever, and now you understand why the times of near automatic growth are over. And clients responded, because clients always respond. In 2024 and 2025, the market was already negative. And what is remarkable is that this happened in an environment where we didn't have any major crisis. So 2024 and 2025 theoretically should never have been negative, but they were, and this is the shift in customer expectation. 2 consecutive years of decline as clients held back on luxury purchases and redirected their spendings in meaningful part towards brands that are not only more accessible in absolute price, but also, in their point of view, often provided a better value perception. So it is all about value, and we sometimes have to simply remind ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, life is sometimes easy. You provide the right value, customers buy, you don't, customers run away. Our estimates now indicate something remarkable. Elevated mid-market has overtaken luxury as fashion's main economic profit creator for the first time on record. Let that sink in for a moment. Clients did not leave the market. They left brands whose value equation stopped convincing them. And this is the critical bridge to our numbers. From here on, growth no longer arrives with the tide. Growth depends on the actual competitive performance of each individual brand and on its ability to create desire. That is the new phase. And once you see it, our forecast makes sense. A word on how we build it. We did significant bottom-up modeling across regions and categories, validated top-down against historical contraction cycles, informed by primary research across more than 30 luxury houses and 2 decades of proprietary frameworks. Our forecast suggests personal luxury goods contract 2 to 4% in 2026. For 2027, our analysis points to a roughly flat year in a range of -2 to +1%. And then from 2028, we believe we will see a gradual recovery, 1 to 3%, building up to 3 to 4% a year. On this path, the market approaches its peak, and remember, the peak was 2023, its peak of 369 billion euros around roughly 2030. Within that forecast, one number actually matters more than the others: a flat 2027. Because, when you look at 2026 and our forecast here, the natural expectation would be different. If the geopolitical situation stabilizes, the assumption could be that 2027 should just bounce. But our analysis suggests it won't, because the indicators point to a geopolitical shock just being a catalyst. It's not the cause of the struggles within the industry. The cause is what we just walked through: a maturing market meeting a more demanding client and a value equation that many brands still have to rebuild. That rebuilding takes longer than 2 quarters. If 2027 comes in roughly flat without acute external pressure, that would be the clearest evidence that the shift is structural. So now let me take you one level deeper, because the global number conceals where the pressure actually sits. The regional pictures matters enormously, because geographic exposure now determines which brands will feel it most. Europe, in our point of view, carries the steepest developed market decline in our forecast. The exposure here is structural. Roughly half of European luxury revenue comes from inbound tourists, and this year every major source of them is impaired at once. For example, Gulf tourism, Chinese travelers that are redirecting, American travel is expected to soften because of a strong euro. And also domestic European demand is in part absorbed by the energy effects directly. The Middle East shows the steepest regional decline of all. Our estimate says sometime between 15 and 20%. And I need to be transparent with you about how this region has evolved against our modeling. The region was on track to be the strongest growing industry region of 2026 before the conflict in Iran reversed it. When we built the forecast, our base case assumed a resolution by the end of June. But as you all know, that resolution has not held. With the ceasefire framework effectively collapsing, the disruption in the region will likely last considerably longer than our base case has assumed. And even when a resolution comes, the second and the third order effects on real estate, on employment, on the confidence of residents and visitors may propagate well beyond it. In our modeling, a scenario like this moves the regional numbers towards the downside and can push the recovery out by 12 to 18 months. What our analysis continues to suggest is that the region's structural drivers, wealth growth, infrastructure investment, cultural development, they all survive intact. Delayed and not destroyed. The high-value Gulf client did not change preferences. That client paused. And the brands that hold their commitment through this period will rejoin the recovery from a stronger position than those that retreat. I've analyzed hundreds of crises and the rebound of crisis. And I've always seen that after a crisis, there's always a reshuffling. There's some brands that emerge much stronger than others. And these are the brands that keep a very close contact with the clients, that inspire the clients, that continue to invest.
I'm Dr. Daniel Langer, and after advising many of the world's most iconic luxury brands and teaching both at Pepperdine and NYU, I've seen how quickly the luxury industry is evolving. And the reality is, most universities simply can't keep up. Today's students want more than theory. You want industry-relevant skills and real frameworks. You want a clear path into fast-growing fields like luxury fashion, luxury beauty, luxury hospitality, and other luxury sectors. That's why we created something special, Equite Intelligence Academia. It's a rigorous, industry-backed luxury education ecosystem. It lets you add a globally recognized luxury certificate directly to your MBA or undergraduate degree. You'll get professionally produced video lessons, real case studies, practical toolkits, assessments, and a certificate recognized in the luxury industry. If you're ready to fast-track your career development, stand out in a competitive job market, this is your moment. Enroll in Equity Intelligence today and elevate your degree and your future.
So that's the Middle East. The United States is, in our assessment, the most structurally favorable major market through 2030 and the single most important source of the industry's recovery. The reason here is the strong wealth concentration. It's the deepest in the world. The country holds roughly a third of global personal wealth, and the top tier has compounded at over 8% in real terms in the last 2 decades. The US contracts only 2 to 3% in 2026 and leads the return from 2028. But the same concentration that makes America the strongest market makes it also the most unforgiving one. The American consumer is direct and decisive, quick to reward value and quick to abandon a brand whose price has outrun its delivery. The US is where strong fundamentals compound fastest and where weak fundamentals unravel fastest. Mainland China, in our forecast for 2026, is approximately flat in a range of -2 to +2%. And this may be the most misread number in the entire industry, so let me say precisely what it means. The total Chinese category holds roughly stable as travel disruption brings some spending home that had flowed abroad. The Chinese luxury market itself is not collapsing. What is changing is who captures the spending within it. Our analysis indicates that Western brand revenue in China declines, while Chinese luxury brands move from peripheral in many categories to central in some categories and continue overall to take market share. So we see within China a structural shift from international global brands more and more towards Chinese brands. And that basically conceals the structure behind it. For brands, it means the right metric is not longer just mainland revenue. It is your share of the Chinese consumer's wallet measured globally wherever the purchase happens. And Japan, after a spectacular tourist-driven boom, normalizes as the yen strengthens, contracting 3 to 5%. Here, the deeper signal is the recent Japanese boom was largely a currency effect. And I've been writing a lot about this over the last 2 years. Brands that build expansion plans on those peak numbers face capacity in a normalized market that a normalized market may not support. One more thing about the recovery, and this may be the most important strategic point in the entire forecast. The recovery, when it comes, will be concentrated. Our analysis suggests that it will be led by the brands that build strong fundamentals, while brands that did not will continue losing share even as the aggregate recovers. Think about what that means. The industry number can rise while your position falls. A recovering market is not a recovering brand. Which brings us to the deepest pattern in the report, where the wealth is actually flowing, because the wealth keeps compounding and the biggest wealth transfer in history is accelerating. What changes is the direction. Client expectations are shifting, and with them, the categories. Our forecast shows wellness and longevity growing 8 to 12% this year, the only major category with double-digit structural growth sustaining 10 to 15% through 2030. Wealthy clients are directing serious capital toward longevity clinics, advanced diagnostics, and health itself, because the only thing they cannot buy more of is time. So this also is kind of leading to logical extensions that experiences and travel are growing. In short, clients are investing more and more in themselves. And when they do, buy hard luxury, the purchases are increasingly made with lasting value in mind. That is why jewelry stands out in our forecast as the most resilient category in personal luxury goods and the strongest performer through 2030, 4 to 7% a year, because it sits at the intersection of emotional meaning and enduring value. And of course, as in all categories, not all brands are going to grow. Some brands are going to outgrow others. So if we basically look at all of this together, the categories that will profit are investment categories. Investment in goods that retain value, but also investments in oneself. Wealth is flowing towards experiences, towards well-being, and towards objects that endure. So let me draw the conclusion, because everything in these episodes points to one place. The market is in the middle of a structural shift. Some brands anticipated this shift and prepared early. They sharpened their value equation, they elevated their experiences, and they built desirability with discipline, and they're growing significantly right now, even through contraction. Many brands across categories, however, are doing more of the same. And in a fundamentally different market setting, more of the same will not close the gap between what clients expect and what they perceive they receive. The geopolitical shock is a catalyst. The structural challenges, as we discussed, are the cause, and they need to be addressed. Only the brands that address them will be growing in the future. And that's exactly why I called the report The Cost of Waiting. Waiting for better market conditions means the necessary actions have not been taken. And the gap between the brands that act and the brands that hesitate widens every single quarter. So what does the work look like? Our report is direct about this, and I will close with it. For brands carrying fundamentals deficits, there is no tactical escape. Spending more on marketing simply amplifies a broken proposition. It does not fix it. Rotating creative directors, for example, without getting the brand story straight, often actually accelerates the erosion. The only durable path is the foundational work across 3 fronts. First, clarify the point of view your brand can authentically own. The differentiated story no competitor can claim, and it has to be able to be defended operationally and not just declared. And you can see this requires significant work. Second, you have to build the systems that deliver a consistent and distinctive client experience so that clients really feel valued through your system and never through the lack of meeting the right person in the right day. And, I just also come back from a series of experience evaluations in several countries. And I can tell you that almost every time we evaluate client experiences in the luxury space, we see significant upside potential in absolute terms, but also simply in creating distinct experience markers that brands can own. And third, you have to commit to delivering perceived value that exceeds the price before you can raise prices. Because creating value that merely meets expectations is survival. Creating value that significantly exceeds expectation, this is what earns you the premium. If you cannot make a client dream, you will not make them pay. That work will take years. And this is exactly why beginning now is existential rather than optional. The brands that start now will grow through the recovery. The brands that will wait will discover that each year of delay widens the gap with the brands that acted. And in the next episodes that I will record, I will do a closer look into different categories. We'll dive even deeper into the report. And I'm pretty sure you're going to find the insights incredibly helpful. We will link the report in the show notes, so you will find them there. And, my ask is, if you find this report and also the podcast useful, please subscribe, share, and also explore our Substacks. One Substack is Daniel Langer, my own Substack, and then we have a Substack, Equite Intelligence. You will find them in the show notes. And in both Substacks, we will explore luxury in a kind of much deeper fashion with additional analysis, and giving you much more information and insights to navigate the massive change that you see in the market, in a much more profitable and sustainable fashion. So thank you for listening. And remember, in times like these, complacency was never a strategy. I will see you on the next episode of the Future of Luxury podcast.
If this changed how you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Bookmark this show, new episodes regularly, The Future of Luxury with Dr. Daniel Langer.